Good morning from the UK to everyone participating in this webinar from around the world. I'm John Knights, Chairman of LeaderShape Global and an author of our new book, Leading Beyond the Ego, How to Become a Transpersonal Leader. Welcome to the latest in our series of webinars on transpersonal leadership. Today, we will be focusing on leadership for digital transformation. In today's webinar, we will learn how our organizations can succeed in digital transformation and that it is more than just strategy and technology. The presentation will last about 30 minutes and there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation using the Q&A facility, which you can access at the foot of your screen. We will also be sending all attendees a copy of the slides and a recording of the webinar within 24 hours, so you will get all the web links that we show you. We will also have a small number of polls during the webinar for you to add your views, so please be ready to do this. Today's presenter is my good colleague, Duncan Enright. Duncan is a director of LeaderShape Global, an experienced lecturer in leadership, an award-winning publisher, and a chief officer in a digital health startup. He is a former senior executive leader in multinational corporations and has also worked in elected and appointed positions in local government and public service for over 20 years. His recent paper, Digital Transformation, Creating a Digital-First Culture Through Transpersonal Leaders, is available to download free of charge from the publisher's Routledge. We'll give you details later. So without further ado, I'm happy to hand over to Duncan.
Thanks very much indeed, John. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to turn my video off now so I don't distract myself apart from anything else. But thank you, yes. Thank you very much for joining us. We all know the digital future is upon us. And the challenge this poses is evident by the turbulence in once seemingly serene corporate and governmental enterprise. Great companies have faltered and new challenges abound. Citizens and customers demand more and can expect better service and entirely new products and approaches to improve their lives. New inequalities and risks have emerged though as well, and old divides sometimes seem irrelevant in these days. So what do leaders need to do to respond to this? Now, John very kindly mentioned the paper that I've had published this year by Routledge. Here's a link to that. But just to let you know that that's going to be available later in the presentation, and we'll share details of other resources as well. So how do organizations succeed? Well, here's what I hope to go through today. At LeaderShape Global, we believe the answer is to challenge and inspire leaders who have the biggest influence on organizations, to bring their values and ethics into full consciousness by doubling down on core purpose for the individual and for the organization. Leaders also need to understand how to articulate a compelling vision and use core purpose as a pivot for change. They need to spread optimism. They need to engage and energize everyone in the best interests of all stakeholders. To pursue the vision takes empathy and a laser-like customer focus. All of this demands that leaders foster the right culture and behavior, including being fully aware of their own behavior and its impact on those around them. So here's a famous quote: "Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself," Leo Tolstoy. In this great new technological revolution, we need to change. We need to change to make sure our core purpose remains relevant and that we make use of the new digital tools to improve the ways that we pursue it. So I'm going to ask for your help first. We know that digital transformation affects a whole range of sectors of our economy. Could you just indicate which of these sectors you primarily work in so we can see the kind of range of people that we have on the call today? So you should see the poll in front of you now. You can click using your poll buttons.
So half have completed now, 2/3 have completed. Wait a few more seconds. Just which sector do you primarily work in? There should be a button for you to click on your screen. Okay, just wait a few moments. Okay, I'm going to end now and share the results now.
So it's interesting to see we have a range here of different sectors. Pity we got nobody from, no farmers on the call today. And although interestingly, I did earlier this year a project on smart agriculture, because even there, digital transformation has a massive role to play in making sure we can feed the world in years to come. But thank you very much indeed. That's useful to know. I'm going to look at a couple of examples now of companies and organizations that faced the profound change of digital transformation. First of all, a large corporation that's really struggled. So Kodak say about themselves, with the slogan, "You press the button, we do the rest," George Eastman put the first simple camera into the hands of a world of consumers in 1888. In so doing, he made a cumbersome and complicated process easy to use and accessible to nearly everyone. So that's their quote. And back in the day, important events in people's lives were known as a Kodak moment. And it was a Kodak engineer who invented the first digital camera in 1975. You can see it here, the blue thing. The prototype was the size of a toaster and captured black and white images at a resolution of 10,000 pixels. That's 0.01 megapixels. So by today's standards, not very high resolution at all. The engineer was allegedly told by senior leaders at Kodak to hide it in order to protect the film business. Incorrectly, you see, the leadership of Kodak seemed to believe themselves to be in the doomed film chemical processing business. Not surprisingly, I suppose, because in 1976, Kodak sold 90% of the US's camera film and 85% of the cameras. But by 2012, which is not that long after, it had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, emerging a year later and now focused on commercial imaging. Let's look at another sector, healthcare, and in this case specifically the National Health Service in the UK. Did you know that it was reported recently that the UK National Health Service, or NHS, is the largest customer in the world for fax machines and one of the last large-scale users of dictaphones? Now, I want to ask you a question. When did you last send a fax or dictate a letter? It's remarkable. But enormous resources, estimated at 10 billion sterling, have been devoted to digital developments in the NHS over the last few years. Cybersecurity attacks on the health service have caused great alarm and pose a risk which is being mitigated, but only thanks to huge effort. Much progress has been made, but the potential for use of digital technology in diagnosis, management, and even treatment is enormous if we get it right. Current data flows across health systems are wholly inadequate. If you see your local doctor, there's far from certainty they'll be able to share your details and their diagnosis or even test results when making a referral to hospital. Information about previous conditions, medications, allergies, and so on are not easy for you to see, nor are they safely shared from clinic to hospital. Basic integration is lacking, and this is not uncommon in all world healthcare systems. But this is a map drawn up by that same National Health Service, NHS, of the digital opportunity. And the promise of digital transformation is to monitor your health on the go, introduce new, portable and convenient and effective treatments, use your data alongside those of the rest of the population to devise and deploy new medicine at a fraction of the cost, in a fraction of the current development time, tailored specifically to your condition and your DNA. Precision medicine, affordably delivered, with doctors and nurses confidently making decisions and with more time to care. Doesn't that sound good? Matt Hancock is the UK Secretary of State for Health, and he says, the truth is, it's not the technology that's holding us back. Just being able to make the best use of technology that's already been invented would transform health and care. In all my experience of digital transformation, it's no different. Only 10% of the challenge is the tech, 90% of the challenge is the culture. Now I'll just repeat that last bit. Only 10% of the challenge is the tech, 90% of the challenge is the culture. So let's look at a good example of a countrywide digital transformation project. Do you recognize this city? Actually, there's a clue in the sign in the bottom right-hand corner. This is Tallinn, the capital of Estonia, which I visited this summer. In 1991, the newly independent Estonian government faced a huge problem. Its economy had fallen way behind neighbors such as Finland, and it risked losing ambitious, outward-looking, highly educated citizens to other richer neighbors, particularly in the European Union, which had just joined, just in the process of joining. Without other infrastructure and resources, its economy started behind its neighbors. But at the birth of the World Wide Web, which was around the same time, its leaders recognized this as one domain in which it could compete. This is a quote from the Chief Information Officer of Estonia, Taavi Kotka, who said, "We had to set a goal that resonates, large enough for the society to believe in." Estonia's population is only 1.3 million, but it has a major asset, trust amongst its people. It chose a deliberate path to create a digital future for the country and now stands at the forefront of digital nations, using technology not just for public services and government, but as a strategic national asset. Thanks to a clear initial vision of a digital society, empowering citizens and involving them in the journey, Estonia has weathered storms and created an efficient, competitive, and successful society and economy. And you can actually become a digital citizen in Estonia, even if you're not Estonian. They allow residency to people from outside the country, which gives you access to European Union markets. It's a remarkable story. So I'm going to ask for your advice again. I've talked about various examples there of digital transformation, but there is no real accepted definition. What I've done is gather a few here, and I wonder if you could tell me which one resonates most with you. Which of these definitions of digital transformation matches your own experience?
So how would you define digital transformation? Choose one.
Yeah, it's interesting to see a range of responses there. Of course, there is no right or wrong answer. Going paperless is one of the things which is a description which is used to drive change at the moment in the National Health Service in the UK. But that's a symptom, not it's an outcome, not a description of the whole process, I think. And you've gone for the more ambitious ones. My own personal preference is for one that mentions customer value, although it's no more valid than the others. But customers are very important in this. So how can leaders create the right climate for their organizations to flourish? So this is a leadership toolkit required for digital transformation, which was created by my colleagues at LeaderShape Global, including John. And what I want to emphasize here is that it's not just robust logic and sound management techniques that are required. In other words, the things that you see to the left of this diagram. Leaders need to transform themselves. To quote LeaderShape's CEO, Greg Young, the role of a leader is to generate followers, bring them to a place they would not ordinarily go, and to inspire new leaders. So digital transformation means going to new places, but that takes a new sort of leader. It's also critical that the organizational culture is transformed for the journey, and that too takes leadership. A new digital future will not just feel different, it will actually be quite different, and it will demand different things from all stakeholders. Talented leaders will look to bring customers along on the journey and build trust. Successful leaders will engage staff fully, have a clear understanding of the reasons for change, and be optimistic that the journey is worthwhile during even the most difficult periods. The confidence of shareholders or owners will be a priority. Everyone will need to be inspired and working towards the common purpose, and that takes radical, ethical, authentic leadership. Transpersonal leaders. But before we talk about leadership further, let's look at an organization and its core purpose. Because I believe by tethering core purpose and describing how it will be enhanced or served by digital transformation, leaders can provide a clear picture for staff, partners, shareholders, and customers alike. Of course, digital transformation without a core purpose being defined is doomed to be a rudderless reaction to technological challenges and adds little to the overall value of an organization or the value it delivers. What's more, it can be hard to gain understanding and support from across the enterprise without that core purpose, which leaves projects prone to failure. The story of Estonia shows the way a core purpose and a clear vision with strong underpinning values and stories can drive even a multifaceted transformation program with great success. The model shown in this slide was developed by somebody called Simon Ewens, who's a former loyalty chief at UK retailer Tesco and also at dunnhumby. I would only add that your staff at every level will also have insights of huge value in determining core purpose. But it's also vital that leaders think about not only the organizational core purpose, but their own purpose too. So what is your purpose? Purpose is at the pinnacle of being a leader, particularly a transpersonal leader. It's the why. Many people are or want to become leaders without giving much thought to their purpose. And without purpose, leaders are at the mercy of their egos and vulnerable to narcissistic tendencies. I wonder if you can think of anybody like that right now who's a leader in the world. I can think of a couple. To find your purpose, you must first understand yourself, your passions, your motivations, and then find an environment or workplace that is or can be aligned with your purpose. So core purpose is the tether, the principal reason you do what you do, the why, and the why of the organization as well. Why does your organization exist? To meet its core purpose. Digital transformation, though, offers a way to change how you pursue your core purpose. It is the how, a new set of tools to reach your core purpose. I'd like to think of this as a digital transformation as a switch, which when thrown, creates new energy and fresh thinking. What is your core purpose and how can you pivot around it to transform? And the switch is something that you as an individual need too. You and your organization need transpersonal leadership to create a digital first culture. Just as your purpose as a leader must be aligned with your organizational purpose, so you need to use different leadership styles to create the right climate within your organization. And at LeaderShape, we describe 6 leadership styles. A transpersonal leader will be proficient in all of these and recognize when is most appropriate to deploy them. For more on these styles, incidentally, you can see, for example, the work of John Knights, Danielle Grant, and Greg Young in the book Leading Beyond the Ego, and I'll show you that later on. But briefly, the visionary style of leadership, self-evidently, is one which leads people towards a shared vision. A coaching style of leadership builds capacity within the organization and the individual consistent with the core purpose. Affiliative leadership provides cohesiveness and harmony within the team. The democratic style of leadership builds engagement by getting input from all stakeholders. Pace-setting leadership is all about setting high standards and targets and driving towards them. And the commanding style of leadership demands immediate compliance. And used sparingly, this can be useful, but too often I think it's seen as a default, and even by some as the definition of leadership. All of these are part of a transpersonal leader's toolkit. But which of these styles do you believe can contribute most to digital transformation? Time for another poll.
So which styles do you think we need most for digital transformation? Choose one. Obviously, we need more than one style, but just which do you think is the most important? Okay, I'm going to end the polling now.
That's remarkable, actually. Of course, there is, again, you're not bound to use only one. And in fact, that whole cocktail of styles is very important. But it's interesting that you've chosen the visionary style as the most important. Chat that, in fact, this might be context-specific. And that's true of I think, the nature of the mix. But nevertheless, I hope that what I'm about to talk about in terms of the most valuable leadership styles will provide some useful guidance on this. And I want to talk about the vision thing first, the importance of the visionary style. Because I believe very strongly that digital transformation requires the intelligent use of the visionary style of leadership. An essential component in any strategy is a vision consistent with the organization's core purpose, recognizing the long-term nature of the change required. Visionary leaders can create high energy in an organization based on a motivating shared vision or story about the change ahead. And this picture is one I took a year ago when I visited the Curiosity Carnival, which is when they let the researchers from Oxford University loose on the town to tell everybody about their work. This event included a night of heritage light, organized by the Society of Light and Lighting. And the organizers used the glorious architecture of Oxford University as a canvas for a cutting-edge light show using the latest technology. It must have been a powerful vision that drove the Light Festival in Oxford to be created. Here also we can see illuminated the inspiring vision that drove Thomas Bodley to rebuild a library in Oxford in 1600. The Bodleian Library is still one of the most important libraries in the world. We face a new knowledge revolution now. Will we be able to show such vision? I think so. But really important element of digital transformation is engagement. And here I've used a picture of Gareth Southgate. He's the one in the waistcoat, by the way. He's the England football manager. And many of you will know that in the summer, England completely outperformed expectations by reaching the semi-finals of the World Cup. And they were widely praised for doing so. But also, Southgate as manager was widely praised for engaging the whole team and embracing their ideas and contributions. So to achieve, I believe all leaders need to listen, engage, and coach their team. And that includes all stakeholders, not just those on the pitch. In the same way as Southgate used every contribution, not just from those from players on the pitch. Leaders can often think they know all the answers. However, in the case of digital transformation, as in many highly complex situations, it's unwise to believe so. And I think a democratic style of leadership builds engagement, commitment, and buy-in. And this alone is enough to recommend this approach. However, a democratic style is also extremely valuable when building a culture of innovation, encouraging employees to exercise specialist skills, or harnessing expertise throughout the company. One key group to engage, both within the organization and among customers, is digital natives, those who've grown up, gone through education, and entered the workforce since the ubiquity of the World Wide Web. They'll be younger, of course, the millennial generation born between 1980 and 1994, along with younger members of the previous generation Y. They constitute a group not usually yet in senior positions, but with a radically different approach to digital technology and a hugely valuable and forward-looking perspective to offer. Only a democratic style of leadership will engage them fully, and only a visionary style will inspire them to contribute. One of the least observed and most valuable and positive styles of leadership is the coaching style, and this is never more the case than at a time of great change. Coaching leaders provide support for team members to develop and grow, using their talents to the full. It's a positive style because, as well as making space for insight, it has a very positive impact on morale. Digital transformation involves a sometimes tough psychological journey through change, and coaching can help individuals cope with the stages of change they find most difficult. So I've talked about the different stakeholders and how it's important to bring them all along. But again, it'd be useful to have, from your perspective, an idea of who the most important stakeholder is. So would you like to vote again on who the most important stakeholder is in your organization? Once again, there's no correct answer here.
Just choose one. Okay, ending polling now.
And that's very interesting to see that the most popular is customers. All of these have a role, of course, but customers are key because we need to continue delivering value, and they have a unique role to play, if only in saying what we're getting wrong. Digital transformation means engaging people throughout the business, including customers, especially customers. A transpersonal leader will always think beyond the organization and put themselves in the shoes of all their stakeholders, but especially their clients wherever possible, involving them in thinking of solutions and contributing to outcomes beneficial to all parties. Now, here's a useful thing. Diversity at senior levels of an organization does help to avoid groupthink and allows leaders to reflect the range of customer experiences. And core to leadership skills is empathy, and is this which allows an organization to understand the needs of customers more closely. And if you look at this diagram, I think it explains, or it describes empathy very well. And just a note, it's not the same as sympathy. Empathy is objective, whereas sympathy is about sharing the emotions of someone. Empathy involves stepping into the shoes of another person. And in the case we're talking about, I think it's important it should be a customer, and walking with them through their experience, but remaining objective and therefore able to do more about it. And it involves listening. So we talked about the different styles of leadership. It's a climate created by leaders that encourages organizations to perform highly. So we describe culture using 4 different parameters. The culture of an organization is built by staff and their behavior to each other and to customers. And that in turn is determined by the climate set by leadership. What kind of cultures do we see in organizations? Well, there are 4 parameters we use to describe a different kind of culture. Power, this one based on inequality and control of access to resources. Structure, a culture based on structure will be very strong in terms of processes and accountability. Achievement, a culture based on rewards and celebration of success. And support, based on trust and empathy. Now, it's the third of these, achievement, which is the driver for digital transformation, with a heavy dose of support to prevent burnout or loss of focus. This culture will need to be shared with all stakeholders, and an achievement with support culture gives a sense of purpose, urgency, and consistency with values to all successful projects. So to conclude then, transpersonal leaders develop the emotional intelligence to determine core purpose for themselves and their enterprise and to align the two. They use this core purpose as a pivot for digital transformation. They articulate a vision and lead in ways that engage people, including digital natives and customers, through democratic and coaching styles. They show customer focus with empathy, build trust and inspiration. They will create a climate in which the culture with support can flourish. Given a shared sense of values and purpose, the transpersonal leader can initiate radical, agile changes because the team understands that decisions are being made in the interests of the greater good. To successfully implement digital transformation, then, an organization needs to become transpersonal, with leaders acting beyond the ego. Leading is about creating the right climate, and only then will strategy and technological solutions fall into place. I mentioned earlier a collection of free white papers available from Routledge, and here's the link to that again. This includes my paper on digital transformation, but also others on leading in global organizations, leadership in India, leadership in China, ethical leadership, and diversity. And here's the book I mentioned earlier as well, Leading Beyond the Ego, by my colleagues at LeaderShape. And this offers a roadmap. You can see just a few of the endorsements here we've received from the book. And it's available from your favorite bookstore, of course, including Amazon. And here's a discount code, which we'll share with you afterwards, as we will the slides. So as they say after every difficult broadcast, if you've been affected by any of the issues in this webinar, call this number. Seriously, I would be delighted to hear from you about your own experience and to help if I can. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you, Duncan. We're now pleased to receive questions. Send them through to Duncan, and he'll be pleased to answer them. I just mentioned while we're waiting, giving you a chance to ask your questions, that 20% discount code that is, you can see there, is only available on the Routledge website. You can either take down that link, or you will get it. You will receive it within the next 24 hours anyway, with the slides. So if there are any questions, let's see. We have one question here from Greg. From your own personal experience, what practical steps did you take to lead through digital transformation? How long did it take? What were the major attitudinal blocks you needed to overcome?
That's a very good question. I can think of one good example where I was leading an organization within a professional body, and we were moving from a past which had been dominated by print and moving with our customers, actually, it's fair to say, towards a digital future. So I work in publishing most of my career, and so this was a publishing division product. I did a number of things, really. But the most important, I think, was probably to reach out for help in dealing with cultural and behavioral issues, both within the team, but also further beyond that. So there were plenty of people in the organization who got it, who already understood what was needed and required. And actually, funnily enough, I can see one on this call today. But we were struggling with others who weren't quite clear about the changes we were trying to make. And we did exactly what I've described here up to a point, with help. We had a series of workshops facilitated by LeaderShape, actually, funnily enough. I was a client of LeaderShape before I became a director, in which we dug into our core purpose, both as individuals, but also the core purpose of the product on which we were working, which was in service of healthcare. Through excavating that core purpose, we also talked a lot about our own behavior at work and elsewhere and our preferences. And the senior team all committed to a new future, which would be to pursue that core purpose. And we were able then as well to divide the things which really mattered to us and the things that were just habit. So what is it about our daily work that we did which was of real value, in this case, improving the use of medicines, and which bits were just habitual behavior that we'd fallen into and become fond of for whatever reason. And so we could begin to map out new processes for creating value and the new ways in which we knew we had to talk to our users, to our clients and customers.
And how long did that process take?
Oh, it's still going on, John, in my absence. So I left 5 years ago from that job, and I was there for 5 years, and it had started before I arrived. But I do think it was a sort of step change, the moment at which we started thinking about the culture of the organization and about how we worked with our users. And that was 10 years ago now.
So what were the major attitudinal blocks?
They were, one was, I think, being wedded very much to current processes, particularly given that there was high level assurance required on our publishing product, and it was difficult to sort of divide out those things which were acquired for the sake of assurance and safety and accuracy, and those things which were just habit. And they were holding us back, I think, from behaving in a different way. Another thing was there were very formal ways of interacting with some users, but we weren't reaching out as we should have been to the whole range of users, which was in this case doctors, pharmacists, nurses, and others. Yeah. So we became much more engaged with our user base at all levels, and I think that was also valuable.
So it shows that that democratic style is really important, and I think it's just worth pointing out that when we talk about the democratic style, we're not talking about one man, one vote. We're talking about people having a say and getting people's input so that people feel involved, as you were talking about earlier.
That's absolutely true. And as I mentioned earlier, with digital transformation projects, no leader or other has the complete answer. And some of the significant challenges we had were people who thought they did. So we had to work with them quite closely to make sure that they understood that they had to work as a team. They had to be part of a whole, and they had to be listening.
So going on from that, what would you say are the major 3 or 4 traits a leader needs to run a successful digital transformation process?
They need to be, they need that strong sense of purpose. They need to understand their purpose and be able to articulate that to others as well. So they need to be really sure of the direction in which they're going, even if they don't know the detailed steps along the way.
Yeah.
They also need to be an incredibly good listener. And with that comes a certain amount of humility. Empathy is partly about humility, putting yourself in the service of others, partly about listening, and partly as well about remaining objective and making good decisions. I think that's really important too.
I mean, you were talking about the different cultures, and I think that the achievement culture that you were talking about, that's very much a combination of visionary and democratic, where the support is very much a mixture of coaching and affiliative, which is the empathy part.
That's interesting as well. I noticed somebody voted for affiliative style of leadership as being important, and I haven't really addressed that in this presentation. But actually, there are certainly times when the leader's major responsibility is to keep the team on the road, keep the team together, and make sure that they are all working harmoniously. It's really difficult. Like other sort of multifactorial change projects, digital transformation throws up huge challenges, not least to people's ability to get along and work together.
Yeah, and it's quite common that a pace-setting, driving leader, which is sometimes what we think is needed, are often not the best ones for bringing that affiliative leadership, that bringing together of the team, the taking them on the side, and stroking them, tapping them on the shoulder, giving them encouragement, all those kind of things are equally important.
It's very true. Actually, there is one other thing as well I should mention, John, which is the everybody faces decision. Every leader faces decisions about whether to allow digital transformation to be led out of a digital department, an IT department, or some kind of technology-led piece. And of course, those guys are really, really vital to any transformation project, because they're the ones who, more than anybody, will understand how the guts of the tech work and can be put to use. They're solution finders as well, very often sort of pace setting in their behavior, and they're absolutely vital, but they're not necessarily the best ones to lead digital transformation, because it needs to engage the whole organization. Yeah. And even when you do have, and even those guys who would tend to be the technical department, office bound, they need to have a really good dialogue with users, customers, because only that way will they understand from that perspective what needs to be done. So not just what can the technology do, but what can the technology do in service of customer need.
Okay, so following on from that, and you've obviously got some personal experience, how do you actually develop leaders to be capable of successful digital transformation?
I think one thing is you have to think about it explicitly. And I think the major problem in a lot of organizations is that they don't address culture and behavior or think about it clearly enough. We're better at it than we were arguably 20, 25 years ago, but I still think there's a lot to be done there. And then you have to go about that work in harness with the digital change. You have to work on the cultural change. And that may mean, I mentioned coaching earlier. It may mean external coaches are of great value, because they can truly bring that sort of objectivity and outside view. So that's useful. I think it's always valuable for an organization to think about its staff development, and that includes senior leaders. You never stop developing. No. So having a leadership development program and an emerging leaders program, which is harnessed to the strategy of the organization and creates the right climate and culture to succeed.
But it's often, as you said earlier, that the leaders focus on the rational solutions, the technical solutions, the strategy solutions, and don't think about the emotional needs, and hence their emotional intelligence.
No, that's right. And it can be really tough on leaders as well. I've known leaders burn out as a result of this, and it takes it out of you. So you do need that kind of support and development, and you need to be aware, I think, of the stresses on you and others within the organization, which are not necessarily just to do with the delivery of a series of projects. They may be to do with the stresses and strains of maintaining the right culture, energy, morale, optimism, and so on. Actually, I didn't mention optimism earlier. I think optimism is terrifically important for leaders in these organizations. I've noticed that when a leader runs out of optimism, they often run out of energy and fight and purpose.
Yeah, I agree. That's a key area of self-management in emotional intelligence. So assuming we can develop the leaders, how do we prepare all the employees for this digital transformation? Apart from the technology, apart from giving them the technology.
I think it's pretty much the same as it is for leaders, isn't it? So certainly they need to buy into the vision. So they need to have a good understanding of what that is and be prepared to acknowledge that it's part of the future for them and the organization. And probably a good way of doing that is to make sure. So I've seen organizations where the values of an are explicitly laid down, values-based organizations. And that, I guess, can help as long as employees feel that they had some part in excavating those values. The same values and core purpose, the same. So I think that everybody needs to be involved in the search and definition for those. Then the vision, if it's consistent with those, should align with employees' own experience and give them a strong sense of direction, I think. Okay. But also you need to have that kind of awareness of emotional intelligence of behavior throughout an organization from top to bottom. So I think that an essential part of induction and of development of staff should be addressing emotional intelligence, awareness of culture and behaviors, as well as how to use the photocopier and where to go for lunch. So it's a sort of start to end part of being a member of an organization, in my view.
Thank you for that. We had one question earlier from an organization that supplies services, technical services to companies for digital transformation. And the question was, how do companies supplying digital transformation technology make sure that their clients think about culture, and also what different leadership styles should they use?
It's a really good question, because as a supplier or partner, of course, you're outside the organization being transformed. One very good answer I had, thanks to a colleague actually, was that it's very important that a company in that position model the kind of behavior they would expect to see from the client. So they would use the same sort of leadership styles and develop a culture closely aligned with that with which they would wish to see. I think they need to share with the client the importance of culture and behavior, and to go through not just the technological changes required, but also some of the things we've been talking about today.
Yeah.
And I also think, of course, you always approach these things with humility if you're a supplier. I think you need to, and another thing I've noticed works well is if you can socialize your involvement quite broadly within the organization. So it's important that clients understand that you're with them every step of the way, and from top to bottom, you're providing support as well. So as far as possible, you should not just limit your involvement to procurement meetings with the executive, but also throughout a project, make sure that you're communicating well with the whole organization.
I think that quite often these organizations see themselves also as consultants, and the danger of being just a consultant or being a consultant is that you feel that you've got to have the answer and give advice, and quite often adding a coaching style to that consulting can be very valuable, so that you're really getting to understand the client and what their needs are before giving the advice.
That's a very good point.
And a lot of consultants perhaps don't do that as well as they might.
It's a very good point.
Okay, are there any other questions that anybody would like to ask? We still have a few minutes left. Maybe, I think the questions have stopped now. So you've obviously, Duncan, answered everybody's everybody's needs.
You all know what to do now. Go out and make change.
You've kept people engaged. The attendees are pretty much all still there, but I think that we can probably finish early if there are no other questions, unless you have anything else you would like to say, Duncan, before we close.
No, just to reiterate, though, I'd be really delighted to hear from anybody on this call, or if you know of anybody who can tell a good story about digital transformation. I'm collecting them, so yeah. It'd be nice to hear from people.
Okay, so we've recorded this session, and you will be receiving a copy of the recording, plus a copy of the slides. We would, of course, encourage you to share that with whoever you think might be interested. And with that, I think we will now close the session. We'll give people a minute so that they can log off, and then we will close down. So thank you very much, everybody.
Cheers.